Hey guys, we're gonna do a speech analysis of Steve Jobs today in a very heated interview that he had back when he still had hair. So for context, Steve Jobs is the founder of Apple and really considered to be the person who took Apple from an idea and a garage to the multi-billion dollar company that it is today. One of the key attributes of Steve, if you have read any of his biographies, is that he's incredibly persuasive and he's incredibly charismatic. And on this video, what you'll see is what I consider to be a masterclass in objection handling and debating. Because as you'll see very quickly, this was not a friendly exchange, and the way he handles it is something that every single one of us who works in a service industry can learn from. Let's check it out.
Bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
Yeah. So off the bat, you can already sense that Steve is so socially aware that when the guy starts saying off, "You're a bright and influential man," he knows that's what we call a shit sandwich. It's when somebody starts off with something nice so that they can deliver something shit to you, and then he might finish off with something nice again. So Steve recognized it right away.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about. I would like...
Okay, it's basically a accusation, right, from this guy. It's sad and obvious that you have no idea what you're talking about. This is in a public setting, and I'm assuming that he's a journalist. So that's not a very professional way of speaking to a public figure, or anyone for that matter. So if that was me, I think I would feel personally offended right away. And if you look at this guy's face, he doesn't look very happy or impressed by Steve at all.
Like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
All right. Whew, lots of heat in that comment. I'm not too sure what it is about the Java in the first part of his statement, but the second part is pretty personal. Like, he's asking, what have you done in the last 7 years? But what he's really saying is, you've done fuck all the last 7 years, so why don't you tell us exactly what you've done instead of just wasting our time? Now let's look at Steve's response. Okay, this is so important. He sits there and he waits. Now, why is this important? Because he's taking the time to process what's happening and he's thinking about the best way to reply. He is not reacting right away. If you react right away, it gets emotional and you might say something that you would regret later on, but that's not what he does.
You know, you can please some of the people some of the time, but...
What a great phrase to start. You can please some of the people some of the time. He says that in third person. You can please some people some of the time. He's not referring to himself, and he's not referring to the person who just asked the question, although that's exactly who he's referring to. It's an indirect way of saying, I don't really need to impress you.
One of the hardest things when you're...
Okay, see, he pauses again. I want you to think about the calmness of this man to be in front of what it appears to be hundreds of people and have the calmness and stillness to just sit there for 15 to 20 seconds when everyone's looking at him for a reply. That takes a level of groundedness and self-confidence to be able to sit there. Most people, when they're in that situation, they will think, oh my God, I better say something because I'm gonna look embarrassing. But him, none of that. He just sat there, he embraced it, and when he's ready to speak, that's when he'll speak.
Trying to affect change, is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas.
Oh my God. So that is genius objection handling 101. People like this gentleman, so not only is he directly referencing him now, he's also saying everybody else who thinks this way, he says, they're right. Now, what does this do to the person internally? They get this feeling of validation, like, yeah, of course I'm right. But the second thing it does is it disarms this person from carrying on with the aggressive feelings towards Steve. So when somebody is having a go at you or is accusing you of something, your initial reaction might be to say, no, you're wrong. But if we learn from Steve here, the initial reaction is, you know what? I think you're right in some way. And poof, the argument's gone. Now let's see what it does next.
I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does. And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things. The hard...
Okay. Again, he's validating this person's perspective. I'm sure there's lots of good things about it. I'm sure they can create a small demo app. I'm sure that these people have well thought out, even better than I do. So he's showing humility. And how can you feel aggression towards that when he's saying to you, you know what? You're actually correct in many ways, and you probably know more than me. So that is such a masterclass in disarming somebody's aggressive feelings toward you that try it next time. Somebody accuses you of something, family, work, just try it. You know what? I think you're right. And you probably do know better than I do. See what happens next.
The hardest thing is, how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't.
Okay, so many things. He goes, one of the hard things about product is how do you turn something that's small to sell $8 to $10 billion worth of product? Now, in my opinion, that is not by coincidence. He literally says 8 to 10 billion because he wants to show people that I'm not thinking the way you guys are thinking. Okay, you guys are just thinking about the app. I'm not thinking about the app. I'm not thinking about OpenDoc. I'm thinking about 8 to 10 billion dollars of product. And in a way, he almost says to them, you actually don't know what I'm thinking because you've never been in my position of 8 to 10 billion dollars in product. So although it can feel quite distasteful to bring up all that money. I personally don't care. I think it's great. It also makes a fair point of you can say whatever you want, but until you are making the decisions that I am, how would you know? And the second part it goes is we have to work back from the customer experience to the technology, which is the inverse of what this person who's accusing him of not knowing anything is saying. Why don't you use OpenDoc, which is technologically focused? And he's saying, no, we don't go technology first, we go people first.
You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got...
Genius. And I've made this mistake more than anyone else in the room. He says, basically, you know what? I would have done the same thing as you before, and that's a mistake. And now that other guy's like, oh shit, clearly I don't know as much as Steve.
Scar tissue to prove it, and I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer?
Okay. Besides what he's saying, there's a couple of filler words that he used. He sits down and he goes, where can we take the customer? And what can we give to give best customer experience, right? So that and a lot of public speaking coaches will say stuff like, oh, it's a filler word, it displays lack of confidence. But if you watch the video, does he sound not confident? No, he sounds very confident. And the is just him thinking, and he's not afraid of thinking on the spot in front of people. So sometimes it's best to think about speaking in public as having a conversation with the audience. And a conversation is filled with ums and ahs sometimes. If you use too many, yeah, you should work on them. But in a natural flow of conversation, if you're in the middle of a dialogue, an and an ah is actually very natural. So this to me is, Steve is not a speaker in this video where he's prepared a lot of answers and everything just sounds smooth and just flies off. No, he's actually thinking and being genuine about his response.
Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have and then how are we going to market that. And I think that's the right path to take. I remember with the laser writer, we built the world's first small laser printer, as you know, and there was awesome technology in that box. We had the first Canon laser printing, cheap laser printing engine in the world, in the United States here at Apple. We had a very wonderful printer controller that we designed. We had Adobe's PostScript software in there. We had Apple Talk in there. Just awesome technology in the box. And I remember seeing the first printout come out of it and just picking it up and looking at it and thinking, you know, we can sell this. Because you don't have to know anything about what's in that box. All we have to do is hold this up and go, do you want this? And if you can remember back to 1984, before laser printers, it was pretty startling to see that. People went, whoa, yes. And that's where Apple's got to get back to. And, you know...
Okay. This next part, this last part was just an anecdote. And you're captured by this story. But although it is an anecdote, it is a story. What's powerful about it is that it's real. And most of the people who are tech people in this room will remember that great product. And he says this one thing. It didn't matter what great technology there was in this box. When people saw what was coming out of this printer, you just had to ask them, do you want it? That question, from a consumer point of view, is much more important than whether the customer actually knows what's inside the box. So he's again going back to the initial question of, should we use OpenDoc? And he's saying it doesn't matter. What's important is not which technology we use, it's what's best for the customer.
I'm sorry that OpenDoc's a casualty along the way, and I readily admit there are many things in life that I don't have the faintest idea what I'm talking about. So I apologize for that.
There you go. And I'm sorry that OpenDoc is a casualty along the way, and I admit that I have a lot of things that I don't know anything about, okay? So he says, I'm sorry. So the person who's clearly defending OpenDoc is now going to be like, oh, okay, thanks for saying sorry. And then the second thing is, and I know I don't know everything that I'm talking about. And the guy goes, yeah, that's true, Steve. I don't either. But in the inverse, had he said, and I'm sorry, OpenDoc is going to be a casualty, but I know what I'm talking about, then the response might be no, but no you don't, because if you did, then OpenDoc would be in your product, right? So he's so masterful with his words and what he's saying. He doesn't leave room for discussion and argument.
Too, but there's a whole lot of people working super, super hard right now at Apple. You know, Avi, John, Garino, Fred. I mean, the whole team is working, burning the midnight oil, trying to, and people, you know, hundreds of people below them, to execute on some of these things, and they're doing their best. And I think that what we need to do, and some mistakes will be made, by the way. Some mistakes will be made along the way. That's good, because at least some decisions are being made along the way. And we'll find...
Again, he's just kind of like slapping this guy in a very indirect and polite way. He goes, Avi, John, blah, 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 they're all working so hard along with hundreds of people underneath. Like, think about this. You just accused Steve Jobs of not knowing anything. And then Steve says to you, you know what? I've got like 200 engineers working on this. So in an indirect way, do you think you know more than my engineers, or our engineers know more than you? And then the second point he says is, well, also the mistakes will be made along the way. And that's good because decisions are being made. He's saying there, look, I'm not afraid to take risk. I'm not afraid to go out on a limb. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that's better than me not making a decision. So he's not really going back to the reporter here, but he's saying to the guys, anyone listening, indecision is going to kill us more than making a bad decision will.
And the mistakes, we'll fix them.
Yeah, and so he's getting the applause
And I
now.
think what we need to do is support that team going through this very important stage as they work their butts off. They're all getting calls, being offered 3 times as much money to go do this, do that. The valley's hot. None of them are leaving. And I think we need to support them and see them through this and write some damn good applications to support Apple out in the market. That's my own point of view. Mistake.
Okay. He says we should support these people. We should support these hardworking engineers. He's saying to this guy, you know, look, you can think what you think, but how about we just show these guys our support? But that's just my own point of view. This last part when he goes, but that's just my own point of view. That pace, that body language with their hands, that openness, that is a very humble, disarming method that probably comes from his heart. He's not rehearsing that. It's just something that he does.
We made. Some people will be pissed off. Some people will not know what they're talking about. But I think it is so much better than where things were not very long ago.
And what does he say? I'm gonna piss off some people. I'm gonna piss off some people. Some people aren't gonna like it, but it's so much better than where it was before. So he's saying, again, he's summarizing to this guy and everyone that empathizes with this guy, look, hey, love it or hate it, it's going ahead, and we're making the decisions here with our engineers. So in a very polite way, if you don't like it, so be it.
We're going to get there.
And that's it. That's a 5-minute speech, but it shows exactly how competent Steve is at understanding human interaction, but just how he's able to turn a very hostile comment into an opportunity to demonstrate his own competence, but also to address anybody who isn't in agreement. And I suppose if I had to recap 3 of my favorite things from that speech, the first part would have to be saying that they're right first. The second part is the indirect use of his own engineers and having 200 engineers working underneath him versus the open doc source. And the third is when he talks about having to push $8 to $10 billion of product. I mean, in a way, he's really saying to people, look, my decision making is not from your perspective of an app. My decision making is far bigger and has far more extensive consequences than you do. So go to school, fool. Like that's kind of the way that he's talking about it. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a lot from Steve, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.